Welcome once again, one and all, to D&D Outloud. I am Ben Riggs, apparently controversial D&D historian and author of Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons. And over the past 13 years of writing and podcasting, I have met hundreds of creative geniuses in and around the world of tabletop role-playing games here on this show. I ask two of these flaming torches of the human imagination to come on and have a fascinating discussion, which I then record and send out into the world. The first of said torches is Jim Lowder. Jim is a writer, an editor, a lore architect, and if we're being honest, a kind of Indiana Jones of shared worlds. From Ravenloft to Forgotten Realms to the trenches of TSR itself, Jim has lived the industry's history, shaped it, and occasionally had to wrestle it into coherence with nothing but a red pen and stubborn Massachusetts resolve.
Very nice.
I'm just going to say, Jim Lowder, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
My pleasure. Our second guest today is a man whose career arc reads like it was designed by a particularly chaotic bard. Pat Kilbane is an actor, comedian, documentarian, and now one of our most energetic chroniclers of Dungeons & Dragons history. You might know him from MADtv, but in the last few years, he's become a relentless investigator into the game's past, digging through archives, tracking down lost media, turning TSR stories into film, enthusiastically interviewing John Peterson. Pat is equal parts entertainer and historian. He's not just here to tell stories, but figure out why they matter. Pat Kilbane, welcome to the show.
Very nice. Nicely done.
Everyone accuses me
to be here.
Thank you. Everyone accuses me of being too enthusiastic, so I'm just leaning into it hard.
That's okay.
It's wonderful. There's effort involved, and there's too little effort in the world, I think, in general. So, outstanding. And I'm excited, especially to be here with both you guys, because I feel like you are both kind of serendipitous Gary Con connections that I've made.
Yes.
And Jim, I don't know if you knew how Ben and I met, but I was queuing up our movie in the little theater room upstairs there across from the Legends of Wargaming, and Ben walked by and is like, I thought I heard John Peterson's voice, and like, are you Ben Riggs? And he's like, yeah. So we went and got lunch. It was fantastic. And
it was really curious to have the sound of John's voice and the sound of my voice be a linking thing. So that was really funny to me.
Well, that's one of the really great things about Gary Con and Game Old Con and those shows that are that size, is you get to run into people that you know, and you've known for years online, or you've known their work for decades, and you get the chance to go and hang out with them.
And Ben, if you've never been, have you been in a Jim Lowder game yet?
I played in at least one, maybe two
Ben's played in Nightmare City as well.
Excellent.
So yeah, Ben played Francis the Gangster.
That's a memory. Wow.
Yeah. So there.
Yeah, I rank Jim's game mastering in the top. I mean, lifetime. He's top 3. I mean, maybe number 1, but without putting a pin in it, I'd say it definitely pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. And that's not always true of the legends, you know. Sometimes somebody will run a game, they're a brilliant rules writer, and game mastering is a whole other skill. It's like, coaching and playing, you know.
And well, yeah, and it's been, especially running Nightmare City, and both of you had the advantage of playing that with tables that were fantastic. When Ben played too, Dale Donovan and John Ratliff were both playing as well, both ex-TSR folks, and the table that you played at Gamehole was fantastic.
Super fun.
Really fun. Yeah.
One of my awkward D&D memories is I got to play with a 1970s era legend of the industry, and I got hit with a slow spell, and then I got hit with another slow spell. I think I could act once every 32 turns.
Oh, fun.
And I was like, I guess I'm going to go pick up my wife. or I could sit here for kind of 4 hours and do very little.
And I'll have another half an hour before I move.
Yeah, and I play so infrequently. I always play suicidally. I'm like, I don't care. I'll open it up. I'll take the damage. Whatever happens, happens. I just want to have a good time. And it was literally the worst possible combination of things that could have occurred, because if I had died, at least I could have got a new character. But I didn't even die.
A fate worse than death.
It was, and I thought, I was like, was I obnoxious to him in some way? Did I piss him off? And it was a published scenario that he wrote. So I did then go to the con and like look, and I was like, did he fuck with me? And he's like, no, he didn't fuck with me at all. He played it exactly as it laid, like straight down. There were two slow spells in that dungeon. I managed to find both in about 45 minutes. Yeah,
congratulations!
So great playing on my.
It was written just for you.
All right, so Pat, would
Yes.
you mind telling us about the movie, The Dreams in Gary's Basement?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I don't know how far back to go. I think we did our first shooting 10 years ago, and yeah, it was originally going to be kind of a generalized survey of the history of D&D and the influence of D&D, but there was so much territory there to cover. It quickly became clear that Gary was the story. It just kept on coming back to Gary, and so eventually we just really leaned into that and made it a tight 3-act hero's journey of Gary's story, and it's just been super fun. You know, I have gradually kind of been leaning away from Hollywood, and it was just it was like a homecoming, really immersing myself again in the gaming community, and quite a relief as well. I mean, it's such a different ethos than Hollywood is. There's just a lot of sincerity, a lot of really interesting people, and I think the only comparison really in terms of how interesting the people are is being around stand-up comedians. Like when you're on the road with a bunch of stand-ups, the conversation is just so electric. And the only other place I've ever experienced that is among gamers. And so, yeah, it's been really gratifying.
What do you think?
Yes.
What do you think the connection is? I mean, is it the goal of being able to cover wide-ranging topics? Is it, to be successful at this, you've got to be quick, right? I mean, what's the connection, do you think?
Yeah, certainly there's an intelligence element of it. And there's a lot of humor crossover, obviously, too. Yeah, gamers tend to be funny. Yeah, I think that, that's a great question. I actually had never tried to piece this together, but I bet if there's a common thread, it just has to do with the outsider being the outsider. Sort of from the outside looking in as far as the mainstream, and spending a lot of time in your mind, thinking about just turning things on their head. What about this? What?
Right.
And the things that you experience playing a game, I think I think it's the same muscles. It's just the same mental muscles, being a gamer and being a comedian. And I don't think that's true of acting, incidentally.
Well, I mean, maybe stage acting. I was just thinking with the stand-up, part of it is the audience is an intrinsic part of the experience. Right. I mean, when you do a stand-up routine, you're already working for the people that are in the crowd. Right.
Very true. Wow, this is we're minutes in and my mind is already blown. When we interviewed Robert Walter, who is the president or chairman of the Joseph Campbell Foundation, and he talked a lot about mythology in Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of stuff in the extended interviews. I think it's going to be fantastic. He's just there for little clips here and there in the movie, but one of the things he talked about is the nature of the story told around the fire, like the pre-writing aspect of storytelling. Right. And how important it is, and the way that things evolve and change. Like as soon as you write it down, it becomes static. The reader's imagination might do different things with it, but it can't go off of the path. that it's
Right.
it's not. And same with a movie or anything like that. But in the moment, when you're the storyteller sharing that with the people around the campfire, it can change. It can change based on external stimuli or some shared moment of experience. That is definitely true in stand-up, and it's obviously true in a game. It's where the players are participating, obviously more so than an audience participates.
And that's and that's when we were talking initially for the when you interviewed me for the movie. I think you asked me what is role-playing game, and I might have said at the time it's shared storytelling, but it's way more than that, because it's shared collaborative storytelling with the rules shaping the outcome of the story.
Right.
So you've actually got three things going on at the same time. You've got the GM, and the adventure, and then you've got the other players that are all wild cards. Everybody at that table can take things in different ways.
Right.
And then you've got the rules shaping what is possible for the players to do and what the story does as well. So that's its unique aspect as an art form.
Right. Totally. Yeah. And there's nothing like it.
Right.
There's nothing like it. And they keep on trying to bend it and twist it and jam it into different molds, and it is what it is,
And it's because the players it's like any one of those adventures that you plan on running, the players will break it every time. I mean, because they can't control what the players do when they get around the table with the rules. Once you give them the rules, they actually don't need anything else again. which foils the commercial aspect of the art form too.
Yeah. That actually, if we could bounce from there into one of the questions that I have on my Jim and Ben list here. Let's see. Gosh. One of the things I was wondering about was Lorraine, who was often described as kind of dispassionate, like a very sort of strict utilitarian, by the books kind of a leader, not too involved with the artistry of what is going on, managed to still have geniuses, still have like a nest of geniuses working for her at TSR. And I am so curious as to how that happens, and the brilliant work that is being generated, some of it expensive to produce, but at the same time, here's this person who's looked at as, Ebenezer Scrooge, and yet, and his workshop is going bananas with all this incredible stuff. So where is the nexus? Where do those things meet practically?
I would say benevolent neglect, but please, Jim, go ahead.
Well, it is partly that, right? I mean, it was always great when management wasn't in the building. That was one of the best parts of working there. My first couple of years, the first year of Toy Fair, when management was all gone, we played par 3 golf through the cubes upstairs, and Zeb Cook had to go to something, and we took all of the Godzilla models out of his office and lined them up down the hallway, and things like that. That benign neglect was part of it. I think there were points with my interaction with Lorraine where it was clear that she wanted to have some input on the creative side. One of the, and I might have mentioned this to Ben, one of the interactions with her that sticks out in my mind is when we were doing Dark Sun. We're putting the Dark Sun stuff together, and she and Troy Denning were trying to figure out what color blue was going to go on the map, and she was marching around the hallways looking for a color, and she saw me coming out of the book department to go get a soda or something, go up to the game department. She walks up to me, grabs me by the shoulders, turns me around, holds like a color swatch up to my sweater, goes, "No, that's the wrong color," and walks off. Troy Denning is trailing along behind her, goes, "I'll explain later," and goes off running after her. And they're looking for the right color for the map.
Right.
And she was that involved in it. And the same thing happened with some of the Buck Rogers art that she would go through and review and have very clear opinions that she had creative ideas that she wanted to participate in. But the biggest thing with TSR management is when they actually came down to managing creators, they were largely terrible at it. The people in upper management were awful. When Jim Ward was there, he was the point between them, right? Mike Cook, who was a VP, was the same way. Mike was smart enough to basically know, and he carried over from Gary's time. He was smart enough to know, I just let these people go and do their stuff, and I provide shields for them from the business side of it to keep anybody from messing with them too much. But that, especially when you get into the 90s, 93, 94, 95, there really wasn't any shield going on between upper management and the creative staff. And that's when you see the most destruction going on.
Interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned Buck Rogers, and Ben, I absolutely love your treatment of Buck Rogers in the book. It's wonderful turns of phrases and very memorable stuff. And I actually have this is something I bought for the movie.
Oh yes,
but never ended up. So that's familiar to you, Jim. Do you want to talk about it?
I did some proofing on that. Everybody at the company in that era eventually got pulled into Buck Rogers, usually unwillingly. I wrote half of a Buck Rogers short story after a bunch of the writers, was 3 or 4 of them, quit the anthology Arrival right before the book was supposed to go to the printer, like 2 weeks out. And so 3 of the stories, at least 2, I think 3 of the stories in that anthology are ghosted by people in the book department.
Interesting.
I wrote a draft over a weekend, and then Pat McGilligan rewrote it, and that got published under Ulrike O'Reilly, because that's not a totally made up name. And I've never read. Exactly. I've never read the final story. It was sort of like, okay, yeah, whatever. Somebody else in the book department and their spouse ended up rewriting one of the stories that was then rewritten. And that used to happen with all of these projects. And so I ended up doing a little work on that book. It's pretty good, actually, the celebration of the old comic strip stuff. There's cool stuff in there. And there are Buck Rogers products like the Mike Pondsmith, the High Adventure Pulp role-playing game is terrific.
I've heard good things about that, although I've never played.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anyone has, which is too bad because it's marvelous. But yeah, all of those Buck projects had gravity to them. So when they ended up being, a lot of them ended up being sort of all hands on deck when they would enter somebody's office.
Yeah, looking at this thing, I feel like it's kind of an odd book because it's so big, and there are parts of it that are clearly meant to be read. I mean, there's some that's just literature, stories, and it's just very odd holding a giant coffee table book to read. And then, this and
because it's the strip reprints, right? I mean,
oh no, there's parts of it that are just like the stories from Amazing Stories. It's just like,
oh yeah,
but yeah, and then they have the strips. I think are a little easier, although the print is kind of small the way that they had
even
to size
with it
in
right
there. Yeah,
yep.
But I feel like my impression of this book is that it is a vanity coffee table book for the family, for the Dilly family.
It is a celebration of Buck Rogers that the Buck Rogers estate threw for itself.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and that is kind of what it really is. Mary Kirchhoff, who was the head of the book department at the time, did a lot of the work on that. And I mean, it's an interesting book. There's a lot of really cool material in it.
Yeah.
But the demand for it wasn't wasn't that great.
Sure. Yeah. It's odd. It reminds me of, my dad worked for a steel company. He was a physicist at a steel company, Armco, it was called. And they would put out a book, and a lot of companies did back then, the history of Armco steel from 1902 to 1960. And, there's all the different presidents and pictures of the smelting equipment and all, and obviously no one's picking this up off the library shelf to read. This is all for, and that's the impression I get kind of with this thing. Buck at the time, I mean, in the late 80s, early 90s, it was still suffering from, if you said Buck Rogers to anybody, they would think Gil Gerard and Tweaky. And this was after Gil Gerard had been, had legal problems, and it was just seen as camp. And they were trying to escape the gravity of that TV show. Right.
But that's really all anybody knew it from. And then if you look really closely at the strips, they had a number of pretty serious problems in themselves, because they were using racial stereotypes and other problems from the pulp era things, Yellow Peril things, and the rest of that. So what are you actually leaning into as nostalgia there?
Right. Right.
There was, who was it? Ron Goulart had written a book about the pulps and about the early comic strips, and it said that Buck Rogers was written on an outhouse wall. I mean, had some really just completely dismissive, as opposed to Flash Gordon, which had this brilliant Alex Raymond art and was still seen as, for all of its flaws and its the anchors that tie it to its era, it still had aspects as art that escaped that. That was never true of Buck for a lot of the people who were looking back at the material. And I think there was a period where he was trying to pitch something to the company, and that didn't go well, because upper management remembered that in the Adventurous Decade, there's this one quote about the Buck strip that was not kind to Buck.
Right.
Yeah, I do find Buck Rogers interesting, just because it's something that was once so firmly a part of pop culture that is now just, totally fallow. Like, if you went and you talked to a 12-year-old about Buck Rogers, they'd be like, what is that? You might as well be talking about Polonius to a 12-year-old.
What?
And again, as we watch kind of Marvel and Star Wars and so much IP just be drained of every last ounce of money and blood and vitality, and this is what these corporations do, right? And someone else will have a brilliant idea and it'll come along. But it's fascinating, I think, to think about dead IP, essentially, that corporations still want to make it happen. Every once in a while, Flint Dille will still post, and I should say to listeners, Flint Dille and his sister Lorraine are the IP holders, essentially, of Buck Rogers. Flint Dille on Facebook will post something about some Buck Rogers movie. Charlize Theron is interested. Just,
right.
Still posting.
Right.
And the thing about it is, and this is true, and this is actually a phenomenon that I see or saw in Los Angeles fairly often, that there would be somebody who is the heir or the owner or the licensor of some obscure IP, or maybe not so obscure, something you definitely heard of but were not a fan of. And it must be so maddening if everybody has heard of a thing, but nobody really, like, I was thinking about that. It's like, I know Flash Gordon. I remember the serials, certainly I remember the movie in 80 or whenever it was with Sam Jones and Queen. And I remember the serials well enough that I remember some of the characters and some of the places and whatnot. And I couldn't name one thing. I mean, until I, leafed through the book, I couldn't name one thing except Buck Rogers, like his ship, the planets, the other characters, the aliens. For whatever reason, it just was not as sticky as Flash Gordon was. And it kind of goes to another subject, and that is Star Wars and how it became the white whale for anyone with an IP. Anyone with an IP is looking at the money that is being minted by George Lucas and Star Wars. And I think, that's Gary too. That's Gary and TSR. That's Lorraine and TSR West, and the failed comic book adventure that they had out there, and and it's Buck Rogers too,
which was and the whole TSR West thing was motivated by desire to make Buck Rogers a comic, even though DC didn't want it, and that crashed the successful DC comics with it because of what they created with that. But even if you look at Buck, Mike Pondsmith did a brilliant game with Buck, and it was really worthwhile. And there might have been novels or stories that you could do with that material that would make it interesting. But then you've got the resistance built around the history of it. I should know this and I don't. You know what? It's too much trouble. I'm not going
to. Right.
I'm not going to. I don't know who Black Barney is and Princess Ardala. And I, you know what? I don't care. Does this have Tweaky in it? I kind of think Tweaky was funny until you watch the show. But they had minis, the little plastic figures and all of the rest of it. They had talking Tweaky dolls that you could put batteries in. And there was the point at which one of the eras where I was thinking of leaving the company, I almost bought myself a talking Tweaky doll for Christmas and was going to chain it to my office door and just leave it on until Lorraine came over and fired me, because I knew that would that would happen. They would not take that well. So they had a taste of what that success looks like.
Well, that's what must have been maddening, because back then, I mean, that's what, early cable, so you're still talking about 3 networks largely dominating television. You got an hour show running for 2 seasons. That is a tough bar to clear. So just the fact that happened must have just really given them a taste for, oh my God, this could be something here. And
it was high and it was high profile. I mean, it was a big deal when it was on. It did. I don't know what the numbers were, but because of the success of Star Wars, if you look at Starlog and the other magazines of the era, Buck was covered very regularly as part of that whole package of science fiction in the 70s.
Yeah, a ton of stuff in the wake of Star Wars, and that brings me back to Gary and talking about his pursuing that, his trying to turn D&D into Star Wars in some way. I feel like a lot of people make fun of him, like, he was out in Hollywood trying to be a movie hotshot. I think that he had a real shot at doing something so much more interesting had he been a little luckier with the talent he was working with, or maybe a little more savvy, or some combination of those two things. I feel like he was not wasting his time.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at everything that's going on now, and the same thing is true of a number of the spectacular failures from TSR in the late 70s and early 80s. The education department, which they put together these educational modules that they were going to do because we can use Dungeons and Dragons to teach kids how to do math and all of these other things, that now there are whole divisions of GAMA, the Game Manufacturers Association. We have committees doing games in education. I was just out at something at the Strong Museum, which was a game academics conference where people are talking about using games in therapy and all of these other things. They tried to do that in the early 80s, but they had the right staff and then the wrong people giving them bad directions for how this material needed to segue to become curriculum at the different state levels and everything else, because that's really complicated. They didn't know what they were doing with that and found the wrong people.
Yeah.
They created good content, bad delivery, completely crashed. They never had any prayer of getting that material into schools.
Yeah, there's also the timing issue of it, of course, too, that, nerd culture was not pop culture yet. And so it's still a little weird, a little strange, still people in Congress like yelling about stuff being dangerous. And nobody wants to be the one to fall on the sword, and nobody wants to be responsible if something goes wrong somehow. That's a very kind of
absolutely. Yeah. Well, and especially when you're talking about getting things adapted officially, when it's both Hollywood and when you look at the larger education thing, it's the same deal, right? The studio chief doesn't want to be somebody in that studio hierarchy doesn't want to be the one to say yes and then have it not work, because then it's on them. The same thing with the curriculum. You don't want to be the person to say yes to D&D and then have somebody come in and say, yeah, but Satanic Panic, I mean, this is, why are you teaching my kids how to do spells in math, rather than math.
That's the 8 letters to Sears that Jim Ward talked about, right? In that you mentioned in your book, Ben. Yeah, it doesn't take many people to just completely get run off the ball.
Right. So, but what Gary envisioned D&D could possibly be is what it is now. He just saw it decades earlier than anybody else.
So then my question, that begs a question: was Greenfield Needlewomen ahead of its time? And if you look at what is out there for sale today, Greenfield Needlewomen is roundly laughed at as stupid and poor investment and all that. And there were, murmurs of reasons for that acquisition outside of just the pure practicality of it. But look at how many people are participating and how many different ways they're expressing their interest in D&D. Right. The whole gamut of everything. If we thought it was crazy.
The number of cookbooks alone,
cookbooks, right? Absolutely, yeah.
And they're bestsellers, and they have amazing content, and that's entirely the right content delivered with the right people through the right channels, and you've got to get all three to line up, right? And occasionally you can have crazy successes where you do something like the Dragonlance books, or Rose Estes coming in and having them do the Endless Quest books, because that's based on her will alone. Essentially, those happen, and they just happen to click with the Random House distribution at the right time. They had the right people in-house doing the right content, and they stumbled into the right distribution. The same thing happened with the Dragonlance novels a couple of years later. And
yeah, that is why it is so unfair, I think, in general, to armchair quarterback. Because if you look at Dragonlance, and there was Needlewomen and Heart Quest, and I've got a couple of references here from Ben's book. The digital rule books and Dragon Strike. These are things that are like you're drilling for oil. Is there a well down there? I don't know. We got to run the bit down there and see what we get. And you're just sometimes you're rolling the dice and just seeing what the zeitgeist is going to give you back on your investment. And sometimes it's Dragonlance, and sometimes it's Greenfield Needlewomen,
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, and the other part of that too, and that's driven a lot by, it's driven a lot by the staff that they have. And it's what you were saying about the number of people who are amazing creators. And good Lord, when you look at Dragonlance, for Dragonlance to work, you had to have Gene Black, who was the head of the book department at the time, recognize that they can do YA novels, leaning YA novels based on these adventures, and recognizing that to give Margaret and Tracy the shot after the author they were going to bring in from out of house to write it didn't work out, that Gene was smart enough to say, all right, Margaret and Tracy can give it a try. And to have that staff in-house to be able to put those books together and put them together in an absolutely crazy amount of time. Just a couple of years, they have the 6 books put together.
Wow.
The release schedule for those novels is insane. The same thing with Rose writing the first bunch of Endless Quest books, because she thought they were such a good idea. She pushed it until somebody at Random House asked them, do you have anything kind of book-like that we could sell along with this game stuff? And she had actually given them a manuscript that was sitting on her boss's desk, who didn't want to publish it. And he, at the meeting, said, why, yes, we do. And came back and then they started putting those together. And Rose wrote the first like 5 of those longhand, doing the page separations, doing the pathing for it by throwing the manuscripts down her stairs and pulling the pages back together.
Wow.
It's
like the lottery machine with the balls inside.
It is. It is.
Why was she throwing the manuscripts down the stairs?
Well, because when you do a Path Adventure book, it says go to number 82. Well, you write them and you're writing them all in sequence. So initially, when you put the manuscript together, it's all straight paths. Well, you can't have that when you publish it. You actually need to mix up the paths. So you go from page 12 to page 87 and then back to 36. And, she talked about this at Gen Con, where basically it was throw the pages and then resort them and stack them out. And then you renumber everything. And that's how you do it. And so much
nobody told Rose how many dice there were around the building. Rose,
right?
We got dice for that.
Yeah, or yes, there are other ways to do this other than just. But she was also so creative and so smart in how to do it. Well, here's an instant randomization,
right
thing I've got with I'm taking care of my kids and all this other stuff. Here you go. Now it's solved. All good.
The old 52 pickup.
Right. Exactly. And so. A lot of what and this was even true in the late 80s when I was starting. I mean, a lot of what we did was the Wile E. Coyote running off the cliff. And as long as we don't look down, it'll be fine.
Right.
And so, that's the story, especially for the first, 15 years of TSR. And that's a testament to the staff they had. You realize how many brilliant people, especially in the game department, the art department. I mean, you could go up and watch Easley and Brom and Caldwell and all the other people who were painting this stuff, just hanging out in a room painting all day.
Wow.
Right?
I've got another observation. Unless you want to take it somewhere else, Ben. I found reading your book, Ben, there was it's wonderful, by the way. Kudos, just wonderful resource and read. And I found though that the heart-wrenching part of people getting fired and the failures and whatnot, especially when the big firings were coming off, when things really went on as kids. I felt like, why is this so much harder? Why is this hitting me so hard? And I felt the same way really reading Game Wizards, when things were going south there. It's like, why is this so gut-wrenching? And I've read whatever McCormick's stuff. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like and I was thinking that I bet it's because, like, as a nerd, like as a person who's an outsider in high school or junior high, there is just kind of an expectation that your bubble's going to be popped. There's just a feeling that if you go into school that day and you're having a good day, that somebody's not going to let that continue, and so I almost feel like this is a grown-up case of the bully taking your lunch money and knocking your books out of your hand, where you've got these brilliant people who have found their place in the world. This is the place. And somehow that just unjustly and cruelly is kind of taken away from them.
There's one other thing, and this goes to something that, I mean, with your experience too, Pat, right? Have you your Twilight 2000?
Yes.
Stuff
that
you built, right? No, tell Ben that the Twilight 2000 weapons, the weapons thing.
I think I can reach it here.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah, this is it. The cover's not on it right now. This is the back cover. This is Tools of the Trade: A Comprehensive Guide to the Weapons of World War III, and it was written by me and a high school buddy who's also a member of my game group currently. It's been going on 40 years. And back in '87, it's like copyright 1987. Counter-Strike Games was the name that we came up for our company. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but we got our high school buddy to illustrate
Wow.
all of
That's
the
so
weapons.
great.
This is all done on a it's done on a dot matrix printer, a Commodore 64.
That's amazing.
So like
Yep.
we hand cut and pasted with rubber cement,
X-Acto knives and
yeah. And the drawing is
I should describe for listeners who are listening to this. Pat is holding up a gorgeously illustrated series of pictures of guns.
homebound.
Homebound, yes.
And you made this in high school with your buddies?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was it was a buddy of mine. His family was going to go to Europe, and he decided to stay home from Europe so we could work on this thing. And we actually called Game Designers Workshop and got Lauren Wiseman on the phone, I believe. It was there's him and Frank Chadwick were kind of the two principals.
Yeah.
Somehow one of the principals picked up the phone. He was eating lunch. He was kind of belching and stuff like during the conversation and explaining how they just we don't take submissions, blah blah blah. And of course they ended up doing something like this. Certainly, not that we gave them the idea, but certainly we foresaw the need for it as players. It's like
and you sold and you went around to local stores, right?
We did, yeah. We got several hundred of them made at a local print shop, and we brought them around to the. Now back then it was like a heyday. There were hobby shops all over the place, and we would leave them. We'd sell them on consignment, so they had no risk to take. They would just put them on their shelves, and we sold a bunch of them. I don't know. Some I don't want to get too exaggerated too much, but
if it was 100, that would be
dozens
amazing.
of them. Yeah, dozens.
Which is amazing, right? So, I mean, the other part of that is when you're talking about reading the stories, because the same thing happens when I read other game company stories and hear this about other people, and it's sympathy certainly and empathy because I've been in those situations. But the other part of it is your relationship as a player to the people who design the games that you play, because you're a co-designer. And that goes back to what we were saying about the nature of role-playing games. Your relationship to the people at TSR who you only knew before you started doing the documentary and a lot of this stuff, who you only knew through the games, you still had a relationship with those people because you sat around tables and did co-creation of stories with them.
Right.
And those people are intrinsic to what you did. So you play Manual of the Plains and Jeff Grubb is at that table with you when you use Manual of the Plains.
Right.
And so you see it on social media now in the way the positive parts of the communities where people interact with game designers. And it's because they understand, even if it's not right in the foreground, they understand what that relationship is. But I think it's intrinsic to the relationship of fans, and it's very different from comic book fans or movie fans or other media fans, because your relationship to the work is different.
Well, I think that's why it's so sad to see everybody get fired in my book. For those of us who were there, I think of them as kind of heroes, which if you think of a hero as someone who like pushes a kid out of the way of an oncoming truck, not that kind of hero, like a culture hero, because man, again, like for me, it was second edition. I always think of the Player's Handbook by Zeb Cook, and to some degree, the second edition Player's Handbook taught me how to be not just an elf, but a man. And I laugh, but it is also true. I think it is also simply true. To then think about all of these great people who did this amazing work,
Right.
Being left on the roadside of capitalism.
Right. Yeah. These givers of joy and fellowship. Yeah. Who love their work. Yeah.
Well, and go ahead.
Oh, I was going to change the subject a little, so if you had a point to make,
so I mean, but it's also, but the other part of that is it's also those people are involved in that connective tissue for the stories, but that you and your friends told. So they were there, you
right?
know, all the people that did Twilight 2000 were part of you doing that manual and that amazing, cool stuff you did, and you and your friends put together and sold at the community, and then your design went out and spread out to the community, and you as creators are part of that too.
Right. Wow.
And it's that nature of what you do.
Yeah. And that kind of segues into this next idea that and Jim, when we interviewed you, you had this great soundbite that'll be in an extended interview, so I look forward to getting it to cut together. But you talked about how everyone wants it to be Monopoly, and this is before Ben's book. Ben, you talk about that specifically, how the higher ups were saying we want this to be Monopoly, and how it can't be because of the very personal nature of the things you're describing. And you talked, Ben, also about the death of institutional memory when you lose people, and then so when you like have a juggernaut like Hasbro come in and they're, you know, shuffling people around and all this stuff, there's a lot more than just technique that is lost in during those circumstances. But I was kind of making this analogy in my mind. If you know what the control panel of a B-52 looks like roughly, don't you? It's just like just rows and rows and rows of instruments to where it is ridiculous. It's, you know, and a B-52 demands that. But if you're in a hang glider, you know, and you've got all of this, you know, this instrumentation is kind of worthless, and it's all about kinesthetic feel. It's all about you and the wind, and you're feeling it in your body and all that. And I feel like I was listening to a Hasbro earnings call pretty recently. They're one from that they did a month ago, and they're using all this terminology and all this stuff, and you know, the ridiculous kind of corporate terms describing Magic the Gathering. And I just thought, you know, this is B-52 like control panel, and you can never stuff it onto D&D. Now, Magic the Gathering is big enough that you can that in some ways that makes sense. Oh, okay, let's take Marvel or SpongeBob SquarePants or, you know, some other IP, and we'll mash it on top of the engine of Magic the Gathering and all the fans, you know. But D&D, it just doesn't work, and it's just this thing that it refuses to be. It just you know, Jerry Seinfeld talks about this with jokes. He said, you can't decide whether the joke is funny or not. The joke is going to tell you if it's funny or not. And no matter how bad you wish for this joke to be funny, and then there'll be things that you think are not really, this is garbage, but it gets a laugh every night. And he says, you know, this thing is stepping forward and saying, hey, I'm a joke. I am a joke, you know. And he said he got this other joke, and you're like you're feeding it with an eyedropper and trying to bring it along, and it just won't live, you know. But then this other thing asserts itself, and I feel like that with D&D is that D&D is just absolutely refusing to become the things that people keep trying to make it, and it just continues to be exactly what it is.
A thing a former Wizards employee told me shortly after Project Sigil was finally put out of its misery. The former employee said, D&D is too big. The game is too big. There's too many spells. You cannot actually make it into a computer game because it's too large. It's too unwieldy. I mean, maybe it could be done, but the amount of money involved and the processing power, like, who'd want to do that? Would it, and even then, would it be any better than what you do at the table? Probably not.
Right.
So it is one of the beautiful things about the game and the hobby, is that it does not bend itself well to digitization, and it does not bend itself well to capitalization, for that matter. Which, you know, I you know, game designers, I'm really sorry. You know, that part does kind of suck. Although they're making more money now than they ever did before. But also there is a charm to it, and that it kind of remains ours.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never heard that. And I think it's almost like chess, where they say, oh, there's only so many pieces and so many moves, but it's so big that it will drive a genius insane trying to wrap his head around it. And I had never known what you just said, where these books, just this little stack of books is going to completely overwhelm a computer program that is trying to replicate what they describe.
When they were working on Sigil, they had one VFX designer working for 2 years straight on spells. I believe, I can't remember if they got 20 or 40 spells done in 2 years, but it was not a large number. Like there's something, I want to say there's like 300 spells in the 5th edition player's handbook, and it was a fraction of them in 2 years of time.
Right.
And they chose the simpler ones. Like they didn't even tackle the hard ones. What do you do with Wish?
But even if even if you can get tech that will replicate that or do something with it, it's still never going to be the same as sitting around the table with people and playing the game that way.
Well, we are beginning to wind down, so I will ask my traditional ending question, which is, Pat, how can people support your work?
Yes, rpghistory.net. You can get the movie streaming there, and you can also see all of the extended interviews and everything there. And if you go to our Kickstarter page for the Dreams in Gary's Basement, there's a button there that takes you to the Backer Kit store, and you can get. Do I have it? I had it there. Oh yeah, this is the Blu-ray box set here. Yep. Yeah, I don't know if you saw the ad that we had, but it's got 6 discs in there.
Holy cow.
It's got over 9 hours of bonus material, and of course the amazing film. And if you're an aficionado, this is quite a feast of D&D history.
And Jim, how can people support your work?
Oh, good Lord. Mostly right now I'm doing consulting stuff. I was just working on the Planet of the Apes role-playing game with Magnetic.
Wow.
I got to do contract license negotiations with Disney, which was, how did I end up here? But mostly I'm working on things like the Everyone's Gone to the Movies film essay series with Ghost Show Press, and just started work on a 2nd edition of the Munchkin book for Steve Jackson Games.
When the Disney lawyer appeared, was the waft of sulfur? Did he come up to the floor?
I didn't have to deal with the lawyers. I got to deal with the licensing people, which was much better. But there were Disney's something else. And I actually got somebody who I almost sold a short story to a dystopian anthology about that would have been a Disney short story that they loved but didn't want to get sued, so they told me I can't be in the book. So
so did you pitch the license people? Is that how you just put a script under the windshield wiper?
I should, right? Yeah, I should pitch them that story, because they might do it now. It's the Bill Hicks. People hating us. That's a big dollar. That's, we can make a lot of money off of this.
Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for finding the time to be on here. I really appreciate it. Pat, it's just wonderful talking to you. Jim, it's always a pleasure.
Likewise.
So thank you so much for taking the time tonight.
Yeah,
great seeing
so much
you both.
fun. Great to see you guys.